Hello everyone, my name is Captain Jack and welcome to Trek Central. Now Star Trek has never shied away from killing off characters, especially characters we've never seen before and will never hear from again. That's where the whole Star Trek and red shirt memes all come from after all. That isn't to say that the franchise shies away from killing off its side or even main characters though. While red shirts are often used to prove the seriousness of a situation, it gets a little more complicated when the talk comes around to the side and main characters, who've given their lives to the franchise. There are good or bad ways to handle or present a real character death. Sometimes they're grand and heroic and other times not so much. Today we look at the latter. If you're new to Trek Central or haven't done so yet, go ahead and press that subscribe button down there and keep up to date with our latest Star Trek video content. We've got the weekly livestream, Ketwolski's Earl Grey pop news, lists, and other great content waiting for you. You can also follow us on social media like Twitter, and visit our new website for the latest Star Trek news, lore, and more. Links can be found in the video description below. Here's our list of 10 disappointing deaths in Star Trek. Warp me. Not a duplicate of Harry, not a mirror universe version, a clone, a changeling, or an android imposter. The exact same character whose mom called the captain because he'd forgotten his clarinet. The adorable young Starfleet officer that nearly got swindled by Quark on Deep Space Nine and then had to be rescued by a known ruffian, Tom Paris. Yeah, that guy. That perky young ensign, he's super dead apparently. In the second season episode Deadlock, Voyager gets caught up in a techno-babble anomaly that splits the ship into two identical Voyagers, occupying the same point in space but out of phase of each other, because science. Long story short, the Harry that we have come to know is unceremoniously blown out into space when a nearby bulkhead ruptured near where he and B'Elanna were working. Harry! The engineer was able to save herself, but there was no hope for Harry. Don't get me wrong, a known character being killed suddenly can have a great impact on viewers. It's not like this hasn't been done before. Yeah, it was an emotional moment watching Harry float out into space, still reaching out to B'Elanna. It could have been a moment that set a new and exciting tone for Star Trek Voyager. Ultimately, though, the impact was greatly lessened by the end of the episode, when the Harry from the other Voyager was sent through a portal to the first Voyager before the other Voyager was destroyed, thus undoing what could have been an interesting story arc within the span of a single episode. In at number 9, Jazia from Star Trek Picard. What a villainous piece of work Jazia was. She was a gang-leading, human-trafficking, Borg-part-stealing, Egypt-killing, evil badass who looked a freaky amount like a young Marina Sirtis. She was a villain who had potential to be complex enough to return repeatedly over time. We already knew enough about her to know that an evil baddie she really was. We were invested, then everything went sideways. Picard and the crew of the La Serena, now of 100% more 7 of 9, are on the trail of Dr. Bruce Maddox, which had led them to Freecloud. A few hilarious hijinks later, and we learn that he is being held by a woman named Jazia. More hijinks, including Picard with an eye patch and an outrageous French accent, and it looked for half a second like the baddie might live to be a baddie another day. Though, tricking Picard into giving her two badass phaser rifles, Seven beams herself back to Jazia's bar and fires her phasers, turning the somewhat surprised Jazia into a fine cloud of red mist.
This is for him.
Yeah, the moment was cool, but did rob us of resisting a deadly enemy hell-bent on scrapping Seven for parts. That could have been cool, making Jazia's death more disappointing than impactful. On the other hand, Sir Patrick Stewart imitating the French accent, I love it.
Appropriately sinister.
In at number 8, we're talking about Hugh from Star Trek Picard. When it was first learned that Jonathan Del Arco would be reprising his role as Hugh the Borg in Star Trek Picard, it was hard to imagine exactly how the show might use him in the story. Turns out the $23.99 version of Hugh couldn't have been further from the individual Borg drone that appeared in a couple of episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation. By the time Picard met him again at the Borg Reclamation Project, Hugh had shed his Borg implants, or as many as may have been possible, and became a well-rounded XB working to save as many others as he could. His eventual death at the hands of Romulan agent Narissa was enough in and itself to earn Del Arco's Hugh as a place on the list of disappointing deaths. Knowing that we won't likely see the character again, never say never, was enough of disappointment on its own. Tragically though, his death was disappointing as well. Killed by a single thrown knife in the middle of a fight that wasn't even his, tragic. Personally, I would love to have seen him go on to lead a full XB revolution on board the Cube, or perhaps even command the legions of Borg drones still on board. However, even those drones got a disappointing death via the airlock. Oh well, a man can dream. In at number 7, James C. Kirk from Star Trek Into Darkness. Yes, we're delving into the Kelvin timeline. It's hard to say who eventually decided that Into Darkness should be a soft retelling of the Wrath of Khan. Whoever it was took what should have been a pretty decent movie and turned it into a funhouse mirror of what it once was. It's not the best of Trek franchise's movies. One of the most iconic moments in all of Star Trek's roughly 800 episodes and 30 movies comes when Spock sacrificed himself to save the Enterprise, in the original Wrath of Khan movie.
Live long and prosper.
It was the ultimate, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one moment, and it excited a genuine emotional reaction from fans. Into Darkness took that moment and cleverly switched the roles around, so that it's Kirk who makes the sacrifice and Spock is left yelling Khan's name. While Wrath of Khan at least left Spock dead for the span of one movie before his friends have to find him and rescue him by rejoining his spirit and his body, in Into Darkness, Kirk's death is completely undone within minutes because of Khan's apparently magical blood. No impact, no emotional reaction, terribly disappointing death. In at number 6, Asira from Star Trek Discovery Season 3. What is it about New Trek that says we have to kill off potentially interesting female antagonists? Jazia, Narissa, Asira, Sutra, kind of. Any of these characters could have gone into a fully fleshed out villain. In the case of Asira, they even went so far as to add depth to her character. Asira was introduced to us as a fairly stereotypical mustache-twirling villain. Over time though, we came to learn that there was actually some real depth to the character. She was a ruthless villain who would do anything, other than stand trial for her crimes of course, to help her people. Sure, she had the power to take on what was left of the entire Federation, but she was also witty and clever, and provided a fantastic foil for Burnham, who would go on to end the season as captain of the USS Discovery. The disappointment here comes once again from a loss of another possible villain, who could have popped up from time to time just for funsies and been a nuisance. In at number 5 we have Shax from Star Trek Lower Decks. Just because a death is full on glorious and exactly the way a character would have chosen to go out, doesn't mean it can't be disappointing.
Don't talk to me, I'm pissed off!
Lieutenant Shax, the head of security and leader of the Bear Pack, died not only saving a fellow officer, but the lives of everyone on board the USS Cerritos. His death took place in a giant fire explosion during a chaotic fistfight. Honestly, it's not clear how his death could have been any more appropriate to the character. The death of an aggressive Bajoran was disappointing, not because of the planning or execution of his death, but for the simple fact that in theory, it means that we won't be seeing a fan favourite again on the series. Or does it? Of all the Star Trek series that might find a reason to bring the characters back to life, it would be Lower Decks. We'll have to wait until next season to get the real story behind this one. In at number 4, James C. Kirk from Star Trek Generations. We've already covered the rebooted version of Captain James C. Kirk in this list, but what about the original William Shatner version of Kirk? Turns out, when you look at it, his on-screen death was pretty disappointing as well. In his own time, Captain Kirk was thought to be killed when a chunk of the Enterprise B was left open to space, after difficulties in rescuing Eloran refugees from a powerful energy ribbon. Kind of a lame way to kill off a franchise's best known character. Fortunately, Kirk was, in reality, swallowed by the massive anomaly which he'd come to know as the Nexus. Alive and well in a place where time has no real meaning, no one knew what truly happened to the decorated captain, until Captain Jean-Luc Picard became trapped in the ribbon as well and was guided to Kirk by Guinan, or a reasonable version of her. The two captains of the Enterprise team up to leave the Nexus and defeat the evil Soren's plans. Unfortunately, the metal bridge that Kirk had been standing on gave way in dramatic fashion, sending the metal structure and the famous captain spinning down a rocky cliff. Kirk was tragically killed by the fall. Aside from the irony of a Starfleet captain being killed by a bridge, there wasn't really much to say about this particular death for this particular character other than to say it was somewhat underwhelming. James C. Kirk, who survived all of those perilous adventures throughout his career, killed in a fall. I'm not saying this wasn't a good time for the character to be killed off, it was an effective way of passing a movie torch from one captain to another. It's just the way that it was done was kind of underwhelming, so that's hard to see his death as anything but a disappointment. In at number 3, we're talking about Tasha Yar from Star Trek The Next Generation. Denise Crosby's Tasha Yar only appeared as a regular on The Next Generation for a single season. The fact that we, as Star Trek fans, have continued to hold the character in such high regard owes a lot more to the decisions that were made after Yar's death than those made surrounding it. After Yar's death in Skin of Evil, we saw Denise Crosby return in the 3rd season fan favourite episode, Yesterday's Enterprise, to reprise the role as Tasha Yar, and then, after her character is sent back in time, Crosby returns as her own half-Romulan daughter. That character is known as one of the most enduring villains in Star Trek, and is a serious contender to show up again in Star Trek Picard. With all of that said, when Denise Crosby wanted to leave the show, she was killed by an evil puddle of garbage bags or oil, when it flung some kind of random black energy at her, just dead, for no particular reason. So, no matter how cool the chain of events that brought Cosby back to TNG afterwards, it's hard to get past that disappointing of a presentation itself. In at number 2, we're talking about Jazia Dax from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. When Terry Farrell, the actress behind Deep Space Nine's science officer Jazia Dax, decided that she wanted to leave the show at the end of the 6th season, a decision was made to kill off her character. This wasn't anything new, of course. TV writers have and have been writing characters out of shows through death for a long time. It was the way they killed off a character that viewers had loved for 6 seasons that made Jazia's death a disappointing one. In temporary command of Deep Space Nine while most of the rest of the crew sets off on a mission to invade Cardassia, Jazia gets the good news from Dr. Bashir that it should be possible for she and Worf to have a baby they were told they probably couldn't have. In celebration, she decides to visit the Bajoran shrine, gets surprised by a power wraith-possessed Gul Dukat who uses a blast of energy that ultimately kills her. So little was the thought of her death that they had Gul Dukat actually lean down over her body to tell her what amounted to, "Oops, didn't mean to kill ya." Not only did the writers kill her off for no reason, they then admitted it was for no reason as well. How disappointing. In at number 1, of course, is Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek Picard. Actually, real-life tears may or may not have been spilled when Picard died in Raffi's arms in the Season 1 final of Star Trek Picard. The moment was nearly perfect. Picard had sacrificed himself in the hopes that he could win the hearts of the Sims, who were in the process of summoning a giant snake robot from Armageddon. He'd had the opportunity to symbolically say goodbye to his old friends through his sort of conversation with Riker, and he'd had the chance to say goodbye to his new friends as well. Then we got scenes from Rios and Seven as well as Raffi and Elnor that were basically written to keep the tears flowing. Then 5 minutes later, he was alive again. Throughout the episode, Dr. Soong and Jazia were putting final touches on the golem that was meant to transfer an aging Soong's mind into an android body, which foreshadowed what was to come. In the end, of course, the golem was used to house Picard's mind instead, thus resurrecting the former captain, or admiral in this case, as though nothing had ever happened. Talk about taking a punch out of a character's death. So that's going to do it for our list today. If you think of someone that we have missed, be sure to let us know down below in the video comment section. Let us know if you think we should rank these disappointing Star Trek deaths differently as well. Perhaps someone else should have taken that number 1 slot. If you want to keep up to date on all the latest Star Trek news, lore and more, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media or join our community Discord server, as well as visit our website for the latest in Star Trek news and reviews. For now, I've been Captain Jack, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time. Live long and prosper, my friends.